So welcome everybody to our Weave webinar. In this webinar we're going to talk about the Weave Redline Tool. Hopefully you'll be able to get something out of this that you didn't know previously. My name's Peter James. I'm the Business Development Manager for Koga. I've been with the organisation for about 7 or maybe 8 years now. I probably know some of you on the call. Those that I don't, hello. And those that I do, hello. Looking forward to catching up with those of you I haven't met yet. The Weave webinars, it's a series that I've put together to try and introduce people to more of the common aspects of Koga and Weave. This is the second webinar. There's more to come. Some of the potential topics I've listed there. And we're also very keen to know if you've got any suggested webinar topics, or if you'd be interested in sharing your experience with others. That would be good also. I'm just going to drop back to my console to make sure everybody who's coming in is coming in. And it looks like they're all coming in. There's nobody waiting in the lobby, so that's fine. So the first webinar that we've done was on the Weave Edit extension, and if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can jump onto our website, which should be displaying here at the moment. Under the resources button, webinars, you'll see a web page chatting about our upcoming webinars and previous webinars. And the previous webinar that we did was on the Weave Edit tool. Clicking on the Learn More button will take you to a page discussing that topic. And because this webinar is completed, you can view it here. This will take you to the Koga YouTube channel. Okay. I won't run that, but that's how you'll gain access to previous webinars. Okay, the agenda for today. First of all, I'll give you a brief overview to introduce you to the Weave Redline tool. I'll demonstrate how you can add, edit, and style the redline elements. That's points, lines, polygons, etc. We'll discuss how the Weave Redline tool can be used in a practical way, and we'll respond to your questions. So please use the chat facility to ask questions, or look, I'm even open to, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, fire away, but please, if you do that, just remute yourself for the benefit of others. That'd be terrific. We have two objectives for this webinar. The first is obviously to demonstrate what the Redline tool is and what you can do with it. The second is to seek your feedback on what you would like from the Redline tool in future. So we're currently in the design phase of the Weave 3 version of the Redline tool, and would like to provide you an opportunity to influence the design of the final product. So please send me your ideas and suggestions, or call me to discuss. I can't guarantee that every suggestion will be included, but I can assure you that everything will be considered. So what is the Redline tool? Well, fundamentally, it's a tool that allows you to draw and annotate items on the map. It's a module that comes standard with the Weave software license, so anybody that's running Weave should have it running on your desktop now. And as I say, it's used to annotate and mark up maps with cartographic elements to make them more readable and meaningful. Note that the Redline tool does simple cartographic operations. It's not a full-blown map-making tool. Rather, it aims to provide a simple way for users to mark up their maps without the need to have a desktop mapping solution. And this is an example. I just sort of threw this together as an example to show you that you can add different elements to make your map a bit more readable. But as I say, it's not a full GIS editing suite, nor is it intended to replace them. So if you're a cartographer, some of the stuff we're probably showing you today you're going to shudder at because it's pretty simple. But if you're just out to create simple maps and simple elements on your maps, then it's ideal for doing that. So it's aimed at organizations that require the ability for a broad range of simple data collection and management purposes. Also note that it's only used for online purposes. Core capabilities. I'll just run through a few of these to introduce you to them, and then I'll take you through a demonstration. So basically, the Weave Redline tool enables end users to add, edit, and delete red lines or annotations on a map. They can be styled before or after data entry. They can be drawn freehand with or without snapping to existing features. They can be created from existing entities, for example, property polygons. They can be created from buffering entities and other annotations, and I'll demonstrate these. They can be used to even select entities in your underlying database for interrogation purposes. They can be exported to shapefiles or that should be a KML for use in other systems. They can be saved and loaded when needed again. And they can be sent to other people using bookmarks. All of these things will be demonstrated. And I'm not sure why, but I've got a thing on my screen here which shouldn't be there. Okay, so data entry, just to give you an idea, spatial data entry can be by the mouse, coordinate entry, file upload, transfer from another entity. All very powerful tools, and as the data is entered, the features can be snapped to other features as they are created and updated to ensure you have an accurate representation of the feature you're adding. And I'll demonstrate all of these right now. In fact, many thanks to the Manningham City Council for the use of their data, both spatial and attribute data. So with that, I will flip over to our kitchen sink. And our kitchen sink is a Weave client that contains virtually every feature and function of Weave. It looks pretty messy, but it will do for the job that we're working on here. As you can see on the left hand side, we've got the usual panels with the entities and the layers and the reports and whatnot. We've got the map here, we've got the tools on the toolbar here. So it should be a fairly standard layout for most people who are familiar with the Weave client. So what I'm going to do is just zoom to an area, good old Cameo Court. No, it's not even going to find it, is it? Typical. Let me restart, log in, and try that again. Cameo Court. We'll zoom into 1:1000 scale. We'll delete select all of that. So this is Cameo Court. And I'll open the Redline tool. Now the Redline tool is this pencil. You should all have a pencil in your toolbar. If it's not in your toolbar, it can be easily configured to be in your toolbar. Clicking that will open up the Redline toolbar. So let's explore this toolbar. So the first group of tools here in this section here, they allow you to create redline objects. So that's the points, lines, polygons, circles, squares, rectangles, markers, and text. The second group of elements here, or tools here, allow you to style your redline objects. So that's your fill settings, your line settings, your font settings, and your marker settings. So let's demonstrate how a simple red line or annotation can be created. In this example, we'll add a rectangle to the map, but first we'll set the style of the rectangle. So in this example, we're going to set a fill setting of yellow. We could also have a none, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. We'll have a line setting. We'll just use the default line settings for this. But you can set the opacity, the line width, the line style, even put arrowheads on your lines if you wish. Next we click on the rectangle, add a rectangle to the map, and as you would expect, there's a rectangle. Note that the redline element is selected, which means you can edit it in a number of ways. So for example, you would want to change the opacity of the fill. You can go back to your fill tool, set the opacity to be a little bit more transparent. You could also click on the none button here, so it's actually an empty rectangle. Let's change the line style to show a thick red line. Oops. So red, line width, and thick. Clicking on this modify button here will deselect the element, or you can use it to reselect the element by clicking on it. You'll note that there are a number of circles around the rectangle itself, or the element, and these are vertices that allow you to edit the actual redline element. So you can move them in any way that you want, and as you do that, it creates new vertices so that you can continue to edit in more and more detail. You can also delete vertices by hovering over the actual vertice or node and clicking the delete button. You can also rotate and move these elements to where you want them positioned. Okay, the third group of tools on the toolbar, this group just, whoa, that's a big fat one there, are the delete individual elements or delete all elements. So if I click on the delete button, then your red line disappears, as you would expect. So let's add another rectangle. Now let's add a circle. And you'll note that both of those elements have been added with the same styling. So this illustrates that redline styles are global settings for all element types. So if you want a different style for each element, you'll need to set the style either before you add the element or after you add it. For example, let's set the circle fill to red here, and the line to be a thin black line. Okay, to assist you to manage those on-screen redline elements, there's also a great tool developed by ViaMap, our business partner in Sweden. This is the Manage tool. This is on the toolbar here. If it's in version, in fact, I think this is in our latest version, 2.77. So most of you probably don't have this or seen this before. Here you can actually select each of the elements and edit them individually. And this is a great tool if you've got, for example, overlapping elements. You don't know which is which. You can click on the appropriate one in here and that becomes editable. So let's explore the other types of redline entities that can be created. Firstly, points. Click on the points button and click anywhere on the map to add a point. Note that the style is the global style. To change the fill color to blue, simply go in here, change it to blue, and then we can add a couple more blue points. You can see these being added on the map and also in the Manage Redlines interface here. Next we'll add a line, but we'll use the snapping capability to add a new line that follows a property boundary. So in the Redline toolbar, we click the Snap Settings button. And here I've already configured this and saved these as defaults, but I've set up a 5 meter snap tolerance. I'm snapping to all the nodes, vertices and edges, and my snapping entity is a property. Now I could set this to any entity underneath, but I want to use properties. And so once I've set my snapping settings, I toggle the snapping function on. I'm going to add a polyline, and as I start clicking, and maybe I'll zoom in a little bit just to show this working a bit better. I'll put my polyline on. You'll see that as I get close to that node, the line jumps, or the point jumps and attaches to the node of the intersecting properties. So this is adding a line exactly on the boundary of that property. By double clicking, I finish my line entry. And you can see that the line style is the thin black line, which is what was previously set. Now we'll toggle the snapping off because that can get irritating at times. Now we're going to add a marker. Markers are very simple markers, and we can change the colors and add as many as we like in that way. Let's change the line style to be a thin black dashed line, and we'll add a freeform polygon. I'll just zoom out a little bit. My next feature I want to add is a polygon. And a freeform polygon is, I'll just get rid of that out of the way. Click, 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 double click to finish. And you'll see that the line setting I've set is on that polygon. The last color, which was the marker color, the global color, is set as the fill. Let's change that fill to green, and let's change the opacity a bit more there. Now let's add a text redline element, and the way that's done is by clicking on the text button here, clicking a point where you want your text to be located, and then in the text box here type in "this is a polygon," and you'll see the text is entered on the screen starting at the point you entered. Now that can be changed, the features in style, so we can bold that and sort of make that a red text. It can also be adjusted to fit anywhere that you want it to fit on your map. Once you're happy with your red lines, you can save them using the Save button. Give it a name. Test 1, 2, 3, and save them up. Now, what we'll do is delete all the current red lines And then what you can do is load your red lines back in and reuse them that way. So that's a really clever way of actually saving your red lines for use later on. Another way of preserving and distributing your red lines is through the bookmark tool. Now, this is quite a powerful one. I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but you can share bookmarks. I'll just put a test 1, 2, 3 in here. Create that bookmark. And what it does, it provides you with a URL. So if I copy that URL, I can fire up another window, paste it in there. And this URL can be sent to anybody who has access to the Weave server. It will fire up the exact map extent you're at, load up all your entities and all your red lines. Quite a powerful way of distributing information. Red line elements can also be entered by coordinates. You can upload files, and they can also be created from a selected entity in your database. So let's explore coordinate entry first. All this is pretty basic stuff. I'm just taking you through some of the fundamentals of redline, how to create them, how to edit them. Practical applications, we'll talk about them in a minute, but some of these are just showing the basics. Hopefully it's not too boring for you guys. I have to assume the lowest common denominator in knowledge here. So let's say a field officer has taken a GPS coordinate measurements of an open drain and wants to display this on a map. So we can create the geometry coordinates using our button here called Create. This will open up a dialog box which we'll set it to be a GDA 94. We want to add a line, and our X and Y coordinates are ordered in our long lat orientation. Now I've got some coordinates I've copied into my document here. So you can freehand type in the coordinates in this box here. You can use WKT or GeoJSON. I'm just going to paste in 3 basic coordinates, and I'll update the system here. Now it's entered the line without fill settings, so I'll just go in there and change that to green. Set the opacity to full on, set a thick line, and I'll leave it as a dashed. So it's a green dashed thick line. Now if at a later stage the geometry changes, somebody's gone out and actually remeasured a GPS point, you can click the update button. Again, I'll set that to GDA 94 so we're using the right coordinate strings. And if this coordinate changes, I'll just update this first coordinate here, something I prepared earlier. I'll move this little box over there and update. You can see it's extended that line down, so the actual geometry has changed for that element. So red lines can also be created by uploading existing geospatial files, which is quite a powerful technique. So here what we'll do is clicking the upload button, we can select a file, and these files could be KML, KMZ files, shape files, GPS or GPX files, map info files, and with the shape files you can also include a projection file. So what I'm going to do is, here's one I prepared earlier. I'll take the projection file and the shape file out of my directory, open them up and upload them. And you'll see that this new redline element has been added into the to the map, and it's using the same line style as I used previously. Final way I want to show you for creating red lines, a very powerful technique and one that I'm sure you'll make good use of. So firstly what we'll do is we'll set our properties layer to be, oops, that's not what I meant to do. We just go back to Cameo Court. Go back to here. Go back to here. So we've selected this property number 1. In fact, let me not select that property. Let me select number 6. This property. In the Redline toolbar, you'll see a button called Get. So this will create a red line from the active layer, and in this case it's that property. So by clicking that button, I've created a red line. Now it's used the global style, but we can change that so we can, for example, have a yellow filled polygon with a black thin, if I can click properly, solid line or dotted line or dashed line. Now this is a really powerful technique for creating red lines representing your entities underneath. Obviously in this case it was a property, but it could be 1, 2 or 3 properties. It doesn't really matter. You can still create red line elements out of it, and you can use them for planning purposes. But in this example, I want to illustrate a proposed boundary change. In order to accurately reposition a boundary, we'll snap the red line to the underlying property layer. So let me just zoom in a little bit in this area here. I'll select the red line. I'll toggle snapping on. Now remember, our snapping properties were property, entity, and a 5 meter snapping tolerance. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that little element there and just drag it up to that boundary there, and it'll snap to it. If it doesn't snap to it, there we go. So that's created a red line shape that represents a proposed property boundary change. And that can be printed, it can be exported, it can be sent to other people for approval or for assessment. Now we'll turn the snapping off because that can get in the way. Just quickly, what I might also illustrate is the export function here. We can export it to KML. So if I export that set of red lines to the KML file, let me then just fire up Google Earth and I'll just show you what that looks like quickly. Google Earth is just one of the free to use systems that we have. We can set up a project, create a new project, import from KML. I'll put in my downloads, this one here. So you can see all of the red lines that we've created are now in Google Earth. It's not a particularly good system for looking at red lines. In fact, not a very good system for looking at any annotations, but I'll show you how to do it in Google Maps shortly. But I just want to illustrate the KMZ export function there. Some of the more advanced redline features. In the first example, I'll show you how to create a red line as a buffer of another red line. So this yellow red line that we've got here is currently selected. You can see that with all the highlighted vertices and nodes. If I click on the buffer selected red line, I'll get a dialog box. If I say 5 meters and I generate, it will generate a new red line with a 5 meter buffer around the existing red line. And I'll just show you what that looks like. If I move it to the side there, you can see that's a complete polygon encompassing the original polygon. Now if I only wanted a buffer that didn't encompass, if I just want the buffer itself, I could do the same thing, but click the only for polygons, it's a difference box, and I can generate that polygon. And just to show you, that's, whoops, I'll change it to a green fill. So you can see that that polygon is now just the outside of the original red line. Okay, so if I delete that particular polygon, red line, and that red line, the final feature I'd like to show you is how to use red lines to interact with your database. So in this example, I'll select the open drain red line, and that's that guy there. And then using this tool here, the selection tool, what I can do is create a new selection, add to the existing selection, or remove, refine. But I'm going to click on new, and it will select the current active entity underneath that red line. In this case, it's properties. So you can see that those two properties are actually falling within the bounds of that selected red line. So that spatial operation is being done through red line. So it's not entity on entity, it's red line on entity. And just to illustrate that, I'll open up the data grid, and you can see that's the first property there, and that's a second property there. Once those two properties are selected, we can use the get function to create red lines out of them. Because they're individual red lines, they need to be styled separately. And this one we can style, oops, as a green one. And once again, we can export them to KML. And as I said earlier, I can show you that in our Google Map. If you're familiar with making your own maps in Google Maps, we can create a new map. We can import the KML is 13, open that up. It'll just load up those red lines into Google Maps, and you can start editing them in Google Maps and presenting them through a Google Map foundation. These elements, by the way, are editable in Google Maps. And it looks a lot better than Google Earth, that's for sure. Finally, red lines can be printed, which is one of the great outputs that people like to use from these systems. So by clicking on a standard map report here, I can generate the report. And as you'd expect, it's the map extent that you just saw on the screen. The elements are all there, all the map marginalia and whatnot's there, depends on how you set up your reports. And then in addition, the maps can also, you can also, let me just go back to here, get rid of that, and just drag the raster layer over. If you're interested in doing a raster, you can just do a a screen grab using your snipping tool, and then paste that into a Word document. So there's all different ways you can get that information. I'm just going to quickly pop back to my webinar control box and see if there's questions popping up. And Zoran has asked, can we snap on Redline 2? No, I don't think that is possible, Zoran. I'll confirm that with Sean, but I'm pretty sure that's not possible. It's only underlying entities at this stage. Peter Moores asks, is there or can there be an option to filter entities in the snap to entity function? I'll take that on notice, Peter, and we'll put that in our version 3 discussion box. Let me now pop back to the final few slides, and then we'll open it up for broader questions if you like. So some of the considerations when using the Redline tool. Be aware that redline elements don't scale with the map, so try and set the scale of the map before adding the redline elements. By that I mean, for example, your text size. If you put in a text on a map and then you zoom out, the text will be the same size on the screen, but obviously your map's scales change, so you just have to be a bit cautious of that. As I was explaining throughout the course of the demo, the redline elements are created with global style, so you can set the style of the redline elements prior to adding them. I think that works best. And obviously the snapping button, toggle it off, toggle it on, otherwise you'll find stuff jumping all over the place. And finally, it's only single redlines or cartographic elements are editable, so that the tool's there for creating and managing simple cartographic elements. Don't sort of start thinking you're going to be making wonderful maps and bits and pieces. It's not designed for super cartographic design. It's designed for simple elements. Now, as I promised, some of the practical applications of using the Redline tool, and I think I demonstrated some of these during the course of the demo there, but basically making a map more readable. Mind you, the maps that I just made today look pretty ugly, but you can use your imagination, start putting them into putting elements on a map to make things more readable by highlighting stuff, drawing arrows in and out of things to direct people's attention. You can create new data from the red lines, so you could even get your public to add red lines from which you can then create spatial data for use in your GIS. That's quite a good practical use for it. You can also create the annotations from existing map elements, so you might take a property, as I exampled there, or even a road center line if you want to do something that runs parallel to your road center line. You can pull that out, or you can grab a whole bunch of light pole points and replicate them and move them to another area. And the other powerful component was there you can send maps with redline annotations to others, so that's using the bookmark capability. So if you're changing building footprint, for example, you can send that to somebody for approval or for review. And with that, I am going to open it up for questions. I'm quite happy to keep going on the chat session there, but if anybody does have a question, just simply unmute and ask me anything. Over to you. Hopefully that's been of some value. Questions, questions, questions? No questions. I love it. I must have shown you everything that you needed to know. All right, so as I mentioned in my opening slide, this is this whole webinar has got two purposes. The first is to not only illustrate to you what the Redline tool does and how it works, but we're also soliciting your feedback. So very much looking forward to getting your feedback. Please jump in, please use it. If you don't use it, you really don't get a full appreciation for what it is. So I really encourage you to jump on it and play around with it in your sandbox there. And just remember, whatever red lines you do create, they're not going to affect your database in any way. They're just a transparent layer that sits on top of everything, and you can delete them. Mind you, you can save them as well and restore them if you wish. But just get in, have a play, and then send me your feedback. If there's any features you'd like to see, or if there's any bugs that you find, please do let us know, because they've got to go into our next release. Okay, one final word is our next webinar is probably going to be another 4 to 6 weeks away. We haven't quite decided on what that will be. It may be our security and monitoring system, but we'll decide that in the next few weeks or so. If you've got any particular desire to see any other of our tools or products in a webinar format, please do send me an email and let me know. That'd be appreciated. Okay, I think that's about 45 minutes. I think we've nailed it. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to catching up with you in the near future. I'll shut the system down now. Thanks everybody. Appreciate you attending this webinar. Cheerio now.